Hi, this is Peter Schwartz, developer of SkiSwitcher2, an articulation switching system for Logic Pro X, and in this video I'm going to explain how the system works. Now the core principle of SkiSwitcher2 is really simple. It's about getting the actual notes of your music to select their own articulations. I mean, what could be simpler and more direct, I ask you. Now, under normal circumstances, that is, without using SkiSwitcher2, this part would look like this. And of course, what we're seeing here are all the key switch notes I played to get this key switching patch to switch to various articulations. So now my MIDI recording contains all these articulation switching instructional events, which interfere with the readability of the score. But even more importantly is that key switch notes don't chase. And here's what I mean. So here's a passage using the same key switching instrument as before, and there are a lot of key switch note instructional events at the beginning and the end, but not a lot in the middle. Now the very last articulation instruction that the plugin received was this one here to switch to pizzicato. So what happens if I want to start playback from the middle of this staccato section? Well, that's what happens. And now that I've stopped just after the playhead hit this détaché key switch, and I want to hear playback from the staccato section again, well, that's what happens. And the reason the staccato section never played back with the right articulation is because the key switch instruction to the plugin to select staccato is back here before the point where I started playback from. And Logic doesn't look backward in the track or chase the actual key switch note that would be needed to play the staccato passage with the staccato articulation. So although the idea of using notes outside the playable range of an instrument is a clever idea and definitely puts articulation selection literally at our fingertips, there's this fatal flaw in using note-based instructional events to get plugins to switch articulations. But with SkiSwitcher2, you don't need to record any kind of instructional events like key switch notes or CCs or program change messages or automation. All the information that needs to associate a note with an articulation is written into the notes as you play them. And that's why the SkiSwitcher version of this same passage plays back without the need for any extraneous instructional events. And you can start playback from any point and always hear the correct articulations because the articulation information is built into the notes. So every time the playhead passes over a note or you click on a note in one of the editors, Logic not only reads the note's pitch and velocity, but also the articulation information. And what is this articulation information? It's the MIDI channel. In SkiSwitcher2, the MIDI channel of a note determines what articulation it's going to sound with. And as you can see here in the event list, the notes are on various MIDI channels. The notes on channel 1 play the staccato articulation. The notes on channel 4 play the portamento articulation. And the note on channel 7 plays pizzicato. And changing the articulation of a note is as easy as changing its MIDI channel. So if I wanted this very last note to play sforzato instead of pizzicato, I'll just change it from channel 7 to channel 5. So how do the notes get on all these different MIDI channels to begin with? Well, that's what I'm going to show you next, and it's at the heart of how the SkiSwitcher system works. All MIDI coming into Logic passes through this thing first. This is the SkiSwitcher2 macro, and it lives in the environment, and... Did you hear that? No? I could have sworn I heard somebody scream when I said environment. For anybody who's deathly afraid or hates the environment, This thing is so easy to install, I can't begin to tell you. Here's how the environment looks before you install the macro and afterward. And there's a video installation guide that shows you how to install it. It's really easy. So all MIDI coming into Logic passes through this macro, which is a MIDI processor that encodes the notes you play on the MIDI channel you select by playing what you would normally refer to as key switch notes, but in SkiSwitcher2, key switch notes are actually channel changing notes. So if I hit the low C, the notes I play will be set to channel 1 on their way into Logic, and of course they'll be recorded that way. If I hit the low C sharp, the notes I play will be set to channel 2 on their way into Logic, and so on. So how does all that translate into selecting articulations? Well, here's how that works with key switching patches. So far, I've shown you how playing what you would normally call key switch notes changes the channel of the notes you play and record as they enter Logic. And the MIDI channels correspond to the same articulation mapping in the key switching patch. Now, here we are putting notes on different MIDI channels to get them to know which articulations to play. But meanwhile, the key switching patches are still expecting to see key switch notes if we have any hope of switching articulations in them. So how to bridge that gap? Well, that's where the MIDI Effects Scripter plugin comes into play. You'll instantiate the scripter on your key switching patches instrument channel and load it up with the SkiSwitcher2 multi-purpose script. The script acts as a MIDI channel back to key switch converter. It examines the MIDI channel of each note, and on an as-needed basis, it fires off a very brief duration ping actual key switch note directly to the plugin. Now these script-generated key switch notes get to the plugin entirely within the channel strip. They never make it to the outside world, which is why you'll never see them in your recordings. What you'll see in the piano roll or the score are just the notes. Thanks for watching, and be on the lookout for other videos I've got in production that show how SkiSwitcher2 works with multi-timbral instruments and how it does polyphonic articulation switching and much more.